Hey, welcome to Classic Performance, and today we've got a great one for you. We're at the American Dream SkyRanch in beautiful 96, South Carolina. We're going to be looking at the Curtiss P-40, and we're with our good friend right here, Thom Richard. Thom is the owner and president of the American Dream SkyRanch, and he is also a vintage fighter pilot and an airshow pilot. So we've got this aircraft in here today. It's headed out to do a couple of air shows, and Tom's going to give us a walk around and tell you everything you need to know about the P-40 and what's particularly interesting about this P-40. So anyway, we're going to turn it over to Thom and get busy and give you a great tour of this P-40. So Thom, give us the basics of the P-40. The plane itself came out in 1938, correct?
That's right. They built 13,738 P-40s. Then this is the last production model, the N model. The Mike and the November model are what's called the long tail. We'll get to that here in a moment. We'll get to the back. The aircraft was powered both by the Allison and a Merlin engine, depending on which model you have in front of you. So this is, like I said, the last model built. So this particular aircraft has the correct Allison 1710-99A, 1425 horsepower. And it's been upgraded with a Hamilton standard hydromatic propeller. Originally, they had a Curtiss electric. As you can see here in the front, we have the massive air intake, which consists of the two on the top, which are for the radiators. It's a water-cooled engine, and the bottom one is the oil cooler. The airflow is all controlled by the cowl flaps just behind, where the outlet of the air is handled by the pilot.
So this, as you close these up, that's restricting airflow.
Correct. So you don't get too much drag and too much cooling at high speed. Mm-hmm. You'll see the aircraft is equipped with fishtail exhaust. These are the widened exhaust mouths, if you will, and that's for lessening the flame at night. It also makes it slightly quieter. The sharp, choked round exhaust that you have on other V12s is quite loud, and this one is in fact quieter.
So was there a reason for it to be quieter, or is it just the natural effect of this fishtail exhaust, which was to reduce exhaust flame at night?
Yeah, it was a side effect. It was a extra benefit, I suppose. It's not really all that significant, but if you have this next to a round exhaust aircraft, you will hear the difference for sure.
And we are at a flight school here, so there's a T6 coming in, and so this is an airport. This is a working airport. So if you'll excuse that little bit of background noise there, a lot of activity here at the SkyRanch.
That's right. We call it music.
Yeah. And what kind of armament did this aircraft have?
So the P-40, most of them were equipped with 6 50 caliber Browning 1919s. The P-40 had about 325 rounds per gun, which gives you less than 20 seconds worth. So you got to be very frugal with your trigger pulls.
So 20 seconds of armament total,
yeah,
on the entire aircraft?
Correct.
Both sides?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, it was also equipped with possibility of external loads, such as bombs and rockets and so on. Yeah, the P-40 was the only aircraft that was able to carry a 1,000-pound bomb on the center line until the P-47 came out. Mm-hmm. The aircraft is equipped with a retractable landing gear. And this comes from the P-36, which was the predecessor to the P-40, which was the first retractable fighter they had in the line. So the way it was designed, the wing was not supposed to be designed for a retractable landing gear. So what they did is they cut a hole, or they had a void that was big enough for the wheel. Well, they had nowhere to put the landing gear, so they mounted the landing gear externally. The hinge is actually outside the wing. That's why we have this fairing to cover up the landing gear as it retracts. Also, the landing gear will rotate 90 degrees as it retracts. So it's actually draggier on its way up and down than it is in the
So when this wheel turns 90 degrees mm-hmm. to go up in the hole, when you're flying the aircraft, can you feel that drag?
You can.
When it pancakes out?
Yep, you can a little bit.
Uh-huh.
And what's funny is, because hydraulics, obviously, is always the path of least resistance, whichever gear comes off the lock first is the one that's going to go up all the way, because it'll grab more air. It will naturally want to be fully retracted before the other one goes.
So the pressure's going from one side to the other.
Correct. So
and that's why you see them not retract at
They're
the same rate.
always uneven, and people complain and ask about that all the time. There's something wrong with the airplane. It's not it at all. It's just the natural design of it, because the hydraulics are going to go the path of least resistance. The guns are loaded into the airframe from the bottom through the gun bay ports right here, and you can see the holes for the casings and links. The ammo is loaded from the top of the wing, and it's loaded over the leading edge, not the trailing edge. The ammo doors fold backwards. You'll see that when you go to the backside.
So where do the spent shells come out?
They come out of these ports right here.
So those ports are there for spent shells.
Correct.
So they just fall into here and come on out on their own.
No reason to carry that stuff around.
Yeah.
It's garbage at that point.
Gravity comes out. And are there any exterior modifications done to this aircraft to make it more modern or to meet certain specifications?
Very little. There are a few antennas that are different. We have actually removed a few antennas that were there originally. Other than that, externally, the aircraft is pretty much identical to the way it was.
Because you
when it
probably
came
would
out
have
of
had
the
an antenna that went from the cockpit to the tail.
and sometimes from the wingtip to the tail. There were various configurations. They have masts and so on and so forth.
So kind of as we walk around to the side of the aircraft, this is an all-metal aircraft in terms of its skin, but the control surfaces are still fabric on this.
That is correct. All the control surfaces on this particular aircraft are fabric, and that was done for several reasons. One is the metal shortage, which they feared. They're more resistant to flutter. They're very light and strong, very easy to repair, and inexpensive. So there was a lot of reasons to have fabric control surfaces.
So it made it lighter on the controls because this is all manually cabled control.
Well, not on the control so much, but the actual physical weight of the controls were lighter. So any measure to make the aircraft lighter is a good thing.
So it's lighter by gross weight, not
Correct.
necessarily lighter on the
Correct.
stick.
Yes.
Okay. And then this model here is an extended tail.
That's correct. So all the early model aircraft, it's really easy to identify them. The leading edge of the horizontal and the vertical would come together at the same point right here. The long tail airplanes, what they did, they affixed a plug, which is underneath here, to move the vertical spar aft. That pushed the vertical back, and the horizontal remained in the same position, as did the landing gear. It does not move on the long tail airplanes. The reason for getting the extra arm was for spin recovery, and the M and the N model are much better for spin recovery, but they never did remove the restriction, so the aircraft is not permitted for intentional spins.
So this design here, moving this back, stabilizer back, helps with spin recovery.
Yeah, because it gives you a longer arm from the CG for the rudder to be more effective.
I got you. And then the navigation lights up here right above the 5, we can see, and we saw them on the wingtip.
Yeah, as you can see, these are not standard colors. This is all military, so this is the way it was in World War II. We don't fly these at night, so we don't have the need for proper nav light colors.
Okay, so you don't have modern strobes and...
Nope, not at all.
So they had particular navigation lights too, so at night you knew which aircraft was which aircraft, correct?
Yeah, so there's a series of colored lights on the belly that they used for identification, and that combination changed every day for the friendly gunners so they didn't shoot you down.
So when we opened up here, you said there was 13,748 of these made, if I remember correct, from 38 to 40.
They quit production in November of 44.
And then how many are left airworthy and how many airframes are left known to be in existence?
That's latest count, to the best of my knowledge. So this changes a little bit. I think there's about 29 aircraft that can fly. There should be about 75 airframes or so in existence. There are several dozen projects that are being restored as we speak back to flying condition. So you're going to see an up-and-coming number of these aircraft in the coming years on the airshow circuit, which is pretty exciting.
So is the popularity of them increasing, or what is driving the demand and also able to fund the demand for the restoration of these aircraft?
I would say the demand for all fighters has gone up. If you just look at the value of fighters in recent years, I mean, they are skyrocketing. So now people are rebuilding wrecks that 10 or 20 or 30 years ago weren't feasible by economic means. Now they are, because they bring in a pretty penny. So people are now restoring aircraft that weren't considered before.
And tell us a little bit about the power plant in here.
So the Allison 1710 is a geared 2-to-1 V12. It's a 60-degree V12. 1,710 cubic inches is the displacement, so that's about 27 liters or so. So it's about 60 inches larger than a Merlin, so they're very equivalent. The Allison, traditionally, most of them only had a single-stage, single-speed supercharger. So it's a low-altitude aircraft, unless they were equipped with a turbocharger, like they were on the P-38, for example. That development was then later replaced by the G6 engine, which was a remote compressor before the carburetor, and then the original one after. And that's a very powerful aircraft engine that was put into the P-82 that was over 2,000 horsepower. So the G6 Allison development was very exciting towards the end of the war. Unfortunately, the jet engines showed up and ruined it for us. A few more years and these engines would have been fantastic.
All right, let's go take a look at the inside of the cockpit, see what's going on in the kind of the business end of this aircraft and the starting procedure and so forth. All right, so we're up here in the cockpit. What we're going to do is kind of take a look at the panel first. And what do we have here?
This particular aircraft is not a stock instrument panel. The original panel is indeed this portion, but the layout's completely custom. So we have all the electric switches on the left, the circuit breakers on the right, the flight instruments on the top left, and the engine instruments on the top right. In the middle we got navigation and then modern multifunction displays, because we travel with these aircraft IFR at times to and from air shows, so it's important to stay safe and be able to fly high. What we do not do with these flying national treasures is scud run and fly low, so that's why we have modern equipment. I know it doesn't look the part, so what I did in my P-40 is I put a helmet hook right here, so I put my helmet right in front of the glass so you could only see the analog instrument, which most of the air show fans really appreciated. Over here on the right we have the carburetor heat control. If you're flying in the weather, this is a very necessary thing for the Allison, because it is prone to carb ice. This is the hand crank for the canopy, and down here we have the cowl flap handle. It's a pretty sturdy device. We have the little release, which is a trigger, and then you pull it up to close it and push it down to open it up. We have two hydraulic pumps on the original aircraft. The N model only has one, and this particular one, the handle is stowed, so it's not in the way when you do a crosswind landing, because it is awful close to your leg, as you can see here. So you put this in place when you need it.
Of course, you do all that while you're flying aircraft.
Absolutely. We do this in the pattern, in fact.
Really?
Yeah, and then just behind we have added a hydraulic pressure gauge. That is not a standard installation on a P-40, but it's a really good idea to have for safety purposes. And on the left side of the aircraft, we have the yellow flap handle, and it's backwards from a T6. So aft would be the up position, and forward would be down. The landing gear light handle is right here, and this is the only sensitive part of the whole cockpit. This little latch is the only safety on the entire landing gear. It'll move freely up and down besides that, and that only latches us from the neutral to the up position. It's pretty complicated landing gear activation. You have to hold the pinky switch, which is the hydraulics, for about 16 to 20 seconds to get the gear up or down. And then you have to verify that the dogs, which are the ones that lock the gear up and down inside the actuator, is in place by manually feeling the pressure on the hand pump. So it's a pretty involved landing gear actuation, a little archaic, if you will, and easy to get distracted.
So if you're moving the gear up or down, you have to have one hand on that control for the duration of the
No, what you do, you have to have your hand on the pinky switch, which is right here. This is the hydraulic activation, which is a rather awkward system. So it's an electrically driven hydraulic pump, and this is where you turn it on.
So that activates the electric pump and creates hydraulic pressure.
Correct. And you got to hold it on. It's very easy to get distracted and forget to do it. Also, we have the two trim wheels, the elevator trim and the rudder trim. The N model is not equipped with aileron trim. That was removed to make it lighter. Originally, the aileron trim was electric. It was a switch on the panel. And what's interesting about these indications that they go backwards, as you can see, from the rotation of the trim wheel. You don't really move them that far. They're very, very sensitive. And these are not degrees. These are just arbitrary units. So we do 1 unit to the right for takeoff on the rudder, which is probably close to 10 degrees, in fact.
Compensating for engine torque.
All the left turning tendencies, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The takeoff position is also 1 unit up. Then we have the throttle quadrant with 4 levers. We have the throttle, the mixture, and the propeller. So just like many other World War II aircraft, the mixture's in the middle and the propeller's on the right, which is awkward if you're used to modern airplanes. And then, of course, you got the friction. Also down on the left side, you have the fuel selector, which selects either front or rear main tanks, as the main and the reserve in essence. And then you have the fuselage tank if you don't have a second seat. And then, of course, drop tanks.
And if you were to have a drop tank or a belly tank, would you have to activate that resource?
You would have to select it via the fuel selector, yes.
So what's the starting procedure for this aircraft?
The Allison starts very well because it has a shower of sparks, or a coil. So the way it's done is we turn our master on. That's our battery switch. We make sure that our throttle is just cracked, about 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch, depending on the rigging. The idle cutoff the mixture has to be in the idle cutoff. That's very, very important. You do not start with a mixture forward, because then you will have a fire. Prop remains forward, fuel on, of course. Then once you're set up with everything, you turn your boost pump on. Make sure that you have fuel pressure. It runs about 16 to 18 pounds. Then we prime it for 2 seconds. You'll see a little flicker on the fuel pressure. Then we hit the starter. After a couple of seconds, we start tickling the primer. And as soon as you have the first cough, you turn the magnetos on, which are down here, and it'll start just like a car. At that point, you can keep it alive with the primer for however long you want, and then you simply just introduce the mixture, release the primer, and she's running. Verify oil pressure, of course, and you're up and going. It's a very easy starting World War II aircraft.
And then what's the warm-up procedure before you can apply power?
So the beauty of a V12 is that we don't have a choke in the cylinder. It's a straight bore because it's liquid-cooled. It's not air-cooled like a radial, for example. So technically, for scrambling, you could go as soon as she was able to take throttle. So for an intercept, there was no waiting at all. You just went. The oil flow on the Allison is very, very high. So if it's cold out, of course, you're going to have high oil pressures. We don't do those things. We don't scramble because normally I should say, we're not shot at. So what we wait for is 40 degrees on the oil temperature, and we wait for 80 degrees on the coolant before we rev it up for the run-up. And we do the run-up around 2,000 RPM. We check our mags and cycle the propeller and things of that sort. And then the minimum oil temperature for takeoff is 50 degrees Celsius. So we treat them with a silk glove these days. They are very expensive, and we try to take care of them.
So that's a quick walk around of the Curtiss P-40. And in this particular P-40, you might see it at some air shows. You might see Thom flying it. So we hope you enjoyed the content today. If you do, give it a thumbs up. That'll help us do more content like this. So that's going to do it for us here in 96 South Carolina at the beautiful American Dream SkyRanch. I want to thank my good friend Thom Richard for his time and showing us around. And we hope to see you next time.